On June 18th of 2021, Karina Cooper calls 911 to report finding her husband Ryan covered in blood. The father of her 3 children had been shot twice in the face. Investigators zero in on Karina Cooper and another man, Houston Danker. The pair were friends. She cut his hair, but police suspected more.
I wasn't telling her I needed help, but I was kind of, right. And then she offered, and that's where I would say that's where the chatting started, the friendship,
Mm-hmm. And then you described it as what, you're her gay friend, or how'd you describe it?
The best way I could put it is, just a gay best friend,
Investigators say chats revealed that Houston Danker and Karina Cooper were lovers, allegedly plotting to kill her husband to collect $500,000 in insurance money. Both were charged with murder. Karina Cooper stood trial in July and testified about her relationship with Danker.
Why did you stop cutting his hair?
Because I had sex with him, and I didn't want him around, and I didn't want that chance of that happening ever again.
Did Houston talk about killing Ryan?
Several times.
Did you ever take him seriously?
No, I thought he was full of crap.
Karina told the jury Danker acted on his own to kill her husband.
Then when the police get there, why didn't you tell them Houston shot my husband?
I was so scared. I was scared. I was panicked.
The jury found Karina Cooper guilty of first-degree murder.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Karina Cooper, guilty of the offense of murder in the first degree, dated this 11th day of July, 2025.
Ryan Cooper was a father. He was someone who was a hard worker by all accounts, taking care of his family, enjoying an evening at home, sitting in his recliner, completely unaware that his wife was plotting his death with her boyfriend. And it took years before she was actually arrested for the crime. Both Karina Cooper and Houston Danker were charged. Houston Danker took a deal, but Karina Cooper went all the way to a trial, taking the stand to tell the jury she had nothing to do with it. They did not agree, and today was sentencing day. Let's take a listen to the victim impact statements from those who loved Ryan Cooper.
Back in July, just 2 months ago, we all heard the horrific details of the day that Ryan was murdered and the absolutely disgusting 5 months of planning that led up to that day. But what ensued in the coming months, weeks, coming days, weeks, months, and years was atrocious. Imagine your brother had been murdered. Imagine the person responsible for his murder was living in your brother's home along with him and his 3 young children. The heinous crime was committed in their home while 3 of the children slept upstairs. And no efforts were made by the person responsible to protect his children from either the purported random intruder or from the horrific crime scene. Within 24 hours, you have been assured by law enforcement that the evidence collected thus far undeniably demonstrates her involvement. Though much of the evidence is unable to be disclosed, you know just enough to begin putting the pieces together. Meanwhile, you are grieving and processing the murder of your brother. You are planning a funeral, all the details being decided alongside your brother's murderer. And that's just the beginning. The person responsible for your brother's murder now has custody of your brother's children. This person, who is typically a passionate, intense, assertive, and aggressive person, has nothing to share with law enforcement, offers no details or insights into who or how someone could come into their home and murder your brother, and never seeks a single update on the status of the case from law enforcement. Over the next 32 months, you want to see your brother's children. You want to remain part of their lives. You want them to know how important they are to you. But in order to do that, You have to spend birthdays, holidays, vacations, other family events, and community activities with your brother's murderer. You want to be there for anything and everything your niece and nephews might need. But along with spending time with the kids, you must also spend time with your brother's murderer. You want to help support their well-being and provide for their basic needs if they have lost not only their father, but the place they could call home. So you provide them and your brother's murderer with family acreage. During all this time, your brother's murderer is parading around the community, portraying herself as a grieving widow and a victim. She is manipulating anyone and everyone who would listen. She rarely ever speaks your brother's name, only occasionally mentioning him in conversation, and then referring to him only as husband. She sought praise and accolades for her actions and her efforts in building this new life for herself and her children. The new life that began when she murdered your brother.
Ms. Cooper is adjudicated to be guilty of the offense of murder in the first degree in violation of Iowa Code Sections 701.7 and 707.2, Parent 1, Parent A, and judgment is entered accordingly. She is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her custody is placed with the Director of the Division of Adult Corrections for temporary custody with the County Sheriff. As far as the reasons for my sentence are concerned, the sentence imposes a mandatory sentence about which the court has no discretion. I will say, this was a senseless crime. Mr. Cooper was, by what I heard at trial and from the statements I heard today, a hardworking, kind, generous man who loved his children and his many friends. Ms. Cooper, your actions, whether you were the one who shot Mr. Cooper or whether as a result of aiding and abetting Houston Danker, resulted in his death. They deprived your children of not only a father, but of a mother. And I can't really state any more eloquently than was stated in the victim impact statements, the broader impact it's had on Mr. Cooper's many friends and family.
Life without parole for Karina Cooper. It's a mandatory sentence there in Iowa. She didn't have anything to say at this sentencing, not showing necessarily any remorse in terms of her words on the record. Let's bring in our think tank, still with us, Josh Colesrud, Claudia King, and Lauren Vellucci. Claudia King, I know you analyzed this case for us back when it was going on. Today, we have the woman who may or may not have pulled the trigger. You even heard the judge say, we're not sure on it. It may have been her boyfriend. It may have been her. But is this justice served?
This is absolutely justice served because the evidence shows, and like you said, whether or not she was the one that pulled the trigger, she was deeply involved in the planning process of this murder. She was there when it happened, and she took away her children's father in such a brutal, horrible way. What's worse, I think, is that watching her cry throughout this entire process, I think these are tears for herself. She doesn't really care about anyone else, and she's crying because she got caught, because the jury didn't believe her, and now she gets to spend the rest of her life in jail. I think she's exactly where she belongs.
Lauren, what stood out to you about this case? It was a strange plot, this plan for 5 months we heard where she and her boyfriend were trying to get this $50,000 life insurance policy, and they weren't arrested for years, but we found out at trial they didn't spend any of the money and they really didn't even talk to each other much after this murder.
Yeah, at least they had the smarts to do that, but they obviously didn't cover their tracks well enough. There was messages deleted, but what really stands out to me is when they came to the home, when law enforcement got there and they found her husband deceased, she was sitting on top of him in the recliner. So strange. And then what rattles me about cases like this is when people do these heinous things with their children in the home. Because no matter if the child saw that, they are there for the aftermath of it, which is trauma for those children for life.
Something that stands out about this one, and you just reminded me, Lauren, her son actually slipped in the blood getting to his father. I mean, horrific. She asked her son to sleep upstairs that night, clearly knowing what was happening. Josh Colesroot, I don't know if there would have been any hope. She had a great defense team. They tried what they could with her to distance her from Houston Danker. Do you think it could have gone differently for her if she had, at the very beginning, told police, my boyfriend came here to shoot him?
Oh, definitely. This case was built on circumstantial evidence. There was certainly a motive for money with the $500,000 life insurance policy. Also, the lover in this case, a co-defendant. I think that she would also have had much better a chance if Houston would have testified in her trial that she had nothing to do with it. But he didn't do that, did he? In fact, he did something that was, kind of unusual in these types of cases, where he pled guilty to the court without a plea agreement, meaning that he just accepted his fate of receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole and without a trial. That's just not something that we see very often in cases where the penalty is so severe. She certainly got what was coming to her, and today certainly was also about the victims who had a lot to say about how this affected them.
Oh, absolutely. Heartbreaking stuff that we heard from the victim impact. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Josh. I want to follow up with you on that Houston Danker took that unusual move. We weren't sure if he was going to come in and testify as a state's witness. He didn't. And then we thought he was going to take his chances at trial and point the finger at her. Where do you think the thought process was for the defense to not try and make a deal? Perhaps, we don't know if they tried, but then to completely avoid a trial. And as you mentioned, he gets the mandatory sentence if he pleads that way, or does he think it's going to benefit him?
Well, based on the statements given by his defense attorneys, he felt like this was the right thing to do. He had a moment where he felt like he didn't want to put his family and friends through a trial, and decided to accept responsibility for what he's done. And you know what? I have to give him credit for that. Obviously what he did was evil and horrible, but saving the victim's family the anguish of having to go through a second trial, that means something. But there is that lingering question that if you're his attorneys, did they try to get a deal, saying, look, we'll plead guilty, we'll testify against the co-defendant, the female, Ms. Cooper, in exchange for a deal. Now, we haven't heard anything about that, but it is another piece of the puzzle we don't quite yet know yet.
Oh, yeah, we don't know so many details, but definitely some finality there inside of the courtroom with this mandatory sentence being handed down. Claudia King, your final thoughts. I know you're a domestic violence expert, and in this situation, we didn't hear anything come out of what transpired between this husband and wife, but these kids have experienced something that is certainly traumatic.
Absolutely, and that is so unfortunate, because we know that children who experience this type of violence, even when it wasn't directly on them, they're still going to have lifelong effects of that. And so I really hope these children are in therapy. I hope they're being well taken care of. And it's so unfortunate that, first off, this had to happen, but she was so selfish that she let the kids be there, and she let one of the kids see his father in that state. So sad.
Yeah, great points. And Orion's sister said that they are in therapy. She mentioned that today during the victim impact statements. Think Tank, thank you for that analysis. Stay where you are. When we come back, we're going to talk about another case, a man who is out, someone who's been in and out of jail, all accused of murder in the death of his wife, Suzanne, when we come back.